They put my house up for sale. Without asking, without telling me, without owning it. I'm at a construction site when my neighbor Dolores texts me a photo that makes my blood freeze. Strangers in business suits measuring my grandfather's cabin deck, while a realtor in designer heels stands in my driveway pointing at the property like she's already counting her commission. The acrid smell of spilled coffee fills my truck cab as my hands shake, staring at these vultures circling my family's sanctuary. I can almost taste the metallic rage coating my tongue as HOA President Veronica Ashworth's smug voicemail plays. Just exploring community improvement options, Garrett, you understand? No, Veronica, I don't understand how you think you can sell what isn't yours. But here's what I do understand: how to fight back. What would you do if strangers were touring your property like they already owned it? And where are you watching from? Please tell me this kind of HOA insanity happens everywhere, not just here. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name's Garrett, and that cabin they're trying to steal? It's been in my family for 43 years. My grandfather Fletcher bought those 2 acres in 1981 with his disability check from the Korean War. The man came home with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares that never quit, but he found peace by that little lake. Built every inch of that cabin with his own weathered hands, cutting each board, driving every nail, installing plumbing that still works better than most new houses. "This is our forever home, Garrett," he'd tell me every summer when I'd help him stain the deck. The sweet scent of pine sap would stick to our fingers for days. Nobody can take what you build with your own sweat. Fletcher died 3 years ago, left me the cabin and every memory soaked into those hand-hewn walls. It's where my 16-year-old daughter Mackenzie escapes when her mom and I aren't getting along, which is most of the time since the divorce. It's where I go every weekend to remember what quiet sounds like after 60-hour construction weeks filled with jackhammers and yelling foremen. That property predates the HOA by 30 years. Grandpa's deed shows clear ownership long before these suburban warriors moved in and decided everyone needed matching mailboxes. Enter Veronica Ashworth, HOA president and professional pain in everyone's ass. She moved here from California 2 years ago, drives a white BMW that she washes twice a week, and thinks our quaint little community needs improvement. Translation: she wants to price out anyone who doesn't drive a luxury car. Veronica's got perfectly manicured nails that she uses to point at violations, and she speaks in legalese to intimidate people who didn't go to law school. I've watched her measure neighbors' grass with an actual ruler. I'm not kidding, a 12-inch wooden ruler like we're all in 3rd grade. Her first shot across my bow came 6 months ago, a citation for my grandfather's workshop being a non-conforming rustic structure. Apparently, hand-built craftsmanship doesn't meet her aesthetic standards. She demanded $15,000 in architectural compliance fees, or complete reconstruction to match her vision of suburban paradise. When I told her what she could do with her compliance fees, in language my grandfather would have appreciated, she escalated to today's real estate circus. The realtor touring my property, Veronica's college sorority sister from USC. The marketing materials describe my family sanctuary as a prime development opportunity with tear-down potential for modern lake access amenities. These vultures were literally discussing demolishing my grandfather's workshop to build a yoga studio. Here's the thing that makes my jaw clench. They have zero legal standing. This is pure intimidation, designed to pressure me into selling cheap so Veronica can flip it to developers for 10 times what I'd get. But it's not just about money. That cabin represents the last solid connection to my grandfather's memory. It's where Mackenzie feels safe when the world gets too loud. It's my weekend escape from job sites where everything is rushed and nothing is built to last. The rough texture of those hand-hewn porch railings tells the story of a man who built things right the first time. The sound of loons calling across the water every evening, that's the piece Fletcher fought a war to protect. The scent of coffee brewing in his old percolator still fills the kitchen every Saturday morning. Now Veronica wants to erase all of that for what? Property values? Neighborhood uniformity? Other neighbors are watching, wondering if they're next on her hit list. Old Mrs. Patterson got a violation for her rose garden being too colorful. The Hendricks family faces daily fines for parking their work truck in their own driveway. The community is holding its breath, waiting to see if regular folks can still live in the places they've called home for decades, or if money and legal threats always win. Well, Veronica just picked the wrong family to mess with. My grandfather didn't survive frozen foxholes in Korea so some HOA tyrant could steal his legacy. Time to show her what Fletcher's grandson learned about fighting back. Veronica's next move came exactly 1 week after the realtor incident. A formal letter on fake legal letterhead that would have made a real attorney wet themselves laughing. Notice of abandoned property statute violation, it screamed in bold letters. According to Veronica's creative interpretation of property law, my weekend-only use of the cabin constituted abandonment under Municipal Code 847.3b. She was threatening daily $500 fines starting in 30 days unless I either moved there full-time or surrendered the deed for community benefit. The smell of fresh toner from her expensive printer couldn't mask the stench of complete bullshit. She'd copied the letter to County Commissioner Bradley Walsh, her tennis partner at the country club. The message was clear: I'm connected, you're not, so roll over and play dead. But here's what Veronica didn't know about construction workers. We solve problems for a living. When a foundation cracks, we don't panic. We dig deeper to find the real problem. I spent my lunch break at the county clerk's office, a musty basement that smells like decades of bureaucratic coffee stains and broken dreams. The clerk, Beverly, had seen every property scam in the book. She pulled out deed records going back to when this area was nothing but cornfields and fishing spots. Your grandfather was smart, Beverly said, her weathered fingers tracing the original survey lines. Look at this. My heart started pounding as she showed me Fletcher's 1981 survey. Our property line extended 50 feet further north than anyone realized, including Veronica. That fancy HOA community mailbox cluster she was so proud of, sitting smack in the middle of my grandfather's land. Even better, the deed included a clause I'd never noticed before. Grandfathered property rights in perpetuity with all municipal exemptions maintained. In lawyer speak for, this land belongs to the Fletcher family forever, and no HOA that didn't exist when we bought it can change that. I'd seen contractors get saved by old building permits they thought they'd lost. Same principle applies to property deeds. Always check 3 places for documentation before accepting someone's word that you're screwed. But the real bombshell came from my neighbor Dolores that evening. She knocked on my door with homemade oatmeal cookies and information that made my jaw drop. That Ashworth woman offered me $500, Dolores whispered, glancing around like we were planning a bank heist. Wanted me to take pictures of your violations, your truck, your boat, anything she could use to build a case. She handed me a handwritten list that made my blood boil. The Morrison family, forced to sell after months of harassment about their non-conforming fence. The Patterson cottage, currently under attack for having too many garden gnomes. The Hendricks clan, facing daily fines for parking their work truck in their own damn driveway. She's not just coming after you, Garrett, Dolores said, the crunch of autumn leaves under our feet as we walked my property line. She wants to clear out anyone who doesn't drive a BMW. Then Dolores dropped the real bomb. I've been documenting everything she's been doing. Photos, recordings, copies of her harassment letters to other families. I was a high school principal for 30 years. I know a bully when I see one. This sweet 70-year-old teacher had been running a one-woman intelligence operation against Veronica for months. She had evidence of systematic harassment, discriminatory targeting, and what looked suspiciously like a coordinated plan to force property sales. But here's the part that'll make you smile, Dolores grinned. I did some research of my own. Your HOA president isn't quite what she seems. Veronica Ashworth, the woman terrorizing our neighborhood with legal threats, her California law license had been suspended for mishandling client trust accounts. Her perfect suburban lifestyle, built on maxed-out credit cards and a mortgage she was 3 months behind on. She wasn't some powerful legal eagle. She was a desperate fraud using intimidation tactics because she had nothing else left. That night, I installed security cameras at every corner of my property. Motion-activated, night vision, professional grade, the kind we use on construction sites to catch equipment thieves. If Veronica wanted to play surveillance games, I'd play them with better equipment. I also called Tom Martinez, a local attorney who specialized in property rights and had a particular hatred for HOA bullies. Bring me everything, he said after I explained the situation. These fake legal letters, the survey documents, your neighbor's evidence file. This woman just picked a fight with the wrong family. My construction crew offered backup. Blue-collar solidarity runs deep when suburban bullies attack one of your own. Even Mackenzie got involved, helping me organize all the documents while asking innocent questions like, "Dad, is it illegal to lie in official letters?" Smart kid. She already understood we weren't just fighting for our cabin. We were fighting for everyone Veronica had targeted. The sweet scent of pine needles filled the evening air as I sat on Grandpa's porch, reviewing our evidence. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole mess started. Confidence. Veronica thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to discover that construction workers are pretty damn good at chess, too. 2 weeks after my courthouse discovery, Veronica played her next card, and this time she brought reinforcements. I was replacing rotted deck boards on the cabin when a white county truck pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Harold Wessler, code enforcement officer, clipboard in hand, and a look on his face like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him emerged Veronica, wearing her power suit like armor and that smug smile that made my teeth itch. "Mr. Fletcher," Harold began, clearly reading from prepared notes, "we've received complaints about unpermitted structures on this property. Specifically, that workshop appears to violate current building codes and may require immediate remediation." The workshop. My grandfather's pride and joy, built with his own hands in 1983. Solid as a rock, better constructed than half the McMansions going up around here. "What kind of remediation?" I asked, though I already knew this was another shakedown. Veronica stepped forward like she'd been waiting for this moment. $25,000 in permits and code compliance updates or demolition within 30 days. The structure simply doesn't meet current safety standards. The acrid smell of Harold's cigarettes mixed with Veronica's expensive perfume created a nauseating cloud in the crisp morning air. I could taste the metallic edge of anger building in my throat again. But here's the thing about working construction for 15 years. You learn to keep your cool when people try to screw you with fake emergencies. Instead of exploding, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Harold," I said calmly, "can you show me exactly which codes this 40-year-old building violates?" Harold shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Veronica. "Well, there's no permit on file with current systems. Because the county lost records during the computer transition in 2019, I replied, "but I bet the original contractor still has copies." Veronica's smile faltered just slightly. She hadn't expected me to do homework. That afternoon, I called every contractor who'd worked this area in the early 80s. The third call hit gold. Jimmy Kowalski, now 74 and retired, but still sharp as a tack. "Fletcher cabin? Hell yes, I remember that job," Jimmy laughed. "Your granddad was a perfectionist. Made me redo the foundation twice because one corner was off by half an inch. That workshop was built to withstand a hurricane." Jimmy still had his project files from 1983, including the original building permit, inspection reports, and final approval signatures. Everything Veronica claimed didn't exist, sitting in a dusty filing cabinet in Jimmy's basement. Sometimes the best defense against bureaucratic bullies is better paperwork than they have, and old contractors never throw anything away. But the real eye-opener came when Harold called me that evening, voice hushed like he was worried about being overheard. "Garrett, I need to tell you something off the record," he said. "Those violations I cited today, they're questionable at best. Mrs. Ashworth has been pressuring me to find problems with certain properties." Harold was up for re-election next year. Veronica had been making campaign donations and hosting fundraisers, but also making it clear that her support came with expectations. "I can't say this officially," Harold continued, "but if you file a formal complaint about harassment, I'll back you up. This isn't how code enforcement should work." The next morning brought my favorite kind of surprise: security camera footage of Veronica's midnight gardening project. At 12:47 a.m., clear as daylight on infrared video, Veronica crept onto my property carrying a bag of decorative flower pots. I watched her carefully place them along what she thought was the property line, then use a measuring tape to mark their exact positions. Her plan was transparent: place unauthorized decorations on my land, photograph them the next day as evidence of property line encroachment, then use that as grounds for another harassment campaign. But my grandfather's survey put those flower pots 15 feet inside my boundaries. Veronica wasn't just trespassing, she was planting false evidence. The smooth plastic of the camera housing felt cold under my fingers as I downloaded the footage. The bitter taste of early morning coffee couldn't wash away my grin as I watched Veronica literally bury herself deeper in legal trouble. I forwarded the video to Tom Martinez, who nearly choked on his morning coffee laughing. She's now committed criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to file false reports, he said. This woman is building our case for us. Jimmy Kowalski delivered the original permits that afternoon, along with photos of the workshop construction and a sworn affidavit about the building's compliance with all 1983 codes. Dolores provided additional intelligence. Veronica had tried to pressure Roscoe at the hardware store to refuse service to problem neighbors, meaning anyone who opposed her agenda. She's getting desperate, Dolores observed, watching from her kitchen window as Veronica drove slowly past my cabin for the third time that day. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. Harold officially withdrew the violation notice that Friday, citing incomplete information and need for further review. Veronica's power play had backfired spectacularly. Instead of intimidating me into compliance, she'd created a paper trail of harassment and given me criminal evidence of trespassing. But I could feel her desperation growing, and desperate people are dangerous. The real war was just beginning. 3 days after Harold withdrew the bogus violation, Veronica went nuclear. A process server knocked on my door at 6:30 a.m., clipboard thick with legal documents that made my morning coffee taste like ash. Veronica Ashworth versus Garrett Fletcher, a lawsuit claiming my property devalued the entire neighborhood by $2 million collectively. The accusations were breathtaking in their creativity. According to her complaint, I was creating a hostile environment through intimidation tactics and deliberate property neglect designed to harm community standards. She was seeking a temporary restraining order to prevent me from accessing my own land while the court sorted out her claims. Her attorney was Marcus Webb from Steinberg, Webb & Associates, the kind of law firm that charges $500 an hour to intimidate working-class people into submission. Their letterhead alone probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. But desperation makes people sloppy, and Veronica had just made a massive miscalculation. I called Tom Martinez immediately. "Bring everything to my office today," he said after I read him the complaint. "And I mean everything: deeds, surveys, camera footage, financial records. This woman just opened the door for us to countersue." While I was gathering documents, my buddy Rick from the construction crew was doing some digging of his own. Rick's cousin worked for a private investigation firm, and family favors run deep in blue-collar circles. "Your HOA queen is in serious financial trouble," Rick reported that afternoon. "Bankruptcy filing shows she owes $180,000 in credit card debt, plus her mortgage is in default. She's 3 months from losing everything." The pieces started clicking together like a well-built frame. Veronica wasn't just power-hungry, she was financially desperate. This whole campaign against longtime residents wasn't about community improvement, it was about survival. Rick's cousin had uncovered something even more interesting. A development company called Lakeshore Properties had been quietly buying up distressed properties around the lake. 3 foreclosures in the past year, all purchased by shell companies that traced back to Lakeshore. "Here's the kicker," Rick continued. "Lakeshore specializes in what they call community optimization. They move into established neighborhoods, partner with HOAs to harass longtime residents, then swoop in to buy properties cheap when people can't afford the legal fights." I remembered something my grandfather used to say about foundation problems. When you see one crack, there are always more hiding underneath. You've got to dig deeper to find them all. That evening, I was reviewing documents in my kitchen when Tom called with news that made me nearly choke on my sandwich. "Garrett, you're not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "I've been researching your HOA's incorporation status, and we've got a problem, a big problem for them." He'd discovered that the Willowbrook Homeowners Association was never properly incorporated under state law. The original filing from 2019 was rejected by the Secretary of State for incomplete paperwork and missing signatures. Veronica never corrected the deficiencies. Every citation she'd issued, every fine she'd collected, every enforcement action she'd taken over the past 3 years, all of it was legally meaningless. An unincorporated HOA has no more legal authority than a book club. "She's been collecting fees and issuing penalties with zero legal standing," Tom explained. "That's not overzealous enforcement, that's fraud." The implications hit me like a load of concrete blocks falling off a truck. 47 families had been paying illegal fees averaging $3,200 each. Veronica had collected nearly $500,000 over 3 years with no legal right to do so. Some elderly residents, like the Kowalski family, had borrowed against their homes to pay her fabricated fines. The stress had literally made people sick. Mrs. Patterson developed anxiety attacks after months of harassment about her rose garden. But here's what sealed Veronica's fate. Tom found records showing she'd used the HOA credit card for personal expenses. Spa treatments, vacation rentals, car payments, all funded with money stolen from neighbors who thought they were paying legitimate community fees. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore," Tom said. "We're talking criminal charges. Wire fraud, racketeering, embezzlement, the works." The smooth surface of my grandfather's kitchen table felt solid under my palms as the full scope of Veronica's crimes became clear. She hadn't just targeted my family. She'd been systematically robbing the entire community for years. That night, I sat on the cabin porch listening to loons call across the dark water, their voices echoing like ghosts of better times. The crisp October air carried the scent of wood smoke from someone's fireplace, mixing with the earthy smell of fallen leaves. My grandfather always said that bullies count on good people staying quiet and scared, but sometimes a bully picks on the wrong person at exactly the right moment when all their lies are about to collapse anyway. Veronica thought she was fighting one stubborn construction worker over a piece of lakefront property. She was actually fighting an entire community that was about to discover they'd been robbed blind by their trusted leader. The real battle was about to begin. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Tom Martinez called, his voice tight with the kind of excitement lawyers get when they find the smoking gun. "Garrett, you need to sit down for this," he said. "My paralegal just finished the deep dive into your HOA's financial records, and what we found is going to blow this case wide open. I was installing new gutters on a client's house, but I climbed down the ladder and found a quiet spot behind my truck. The metallic taste of anticipation filled my mouth as I waited for Tom to drop the bomb. Your HOA collected $430,000 from residents over 3 years," he began. "But here's the kicker. Only $180,000 remains in the account. $250,000 is missing." The numbers hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. That wasn't just skimming or poor bookkeeping. That was systematic theft on a massive scale. "Where did it go?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Veronica's personal accounts show suspicious deposits matching HOA withdrawal dates exactly," Tom continued. "Wire transfers, cashier's checks, even direct deposits disguised as consulting fees. She's been looting the community fund like her personal piggy bank." But the financial fraud was just the beginning. Tom's investigation had uncovered the real conspiracy behind Veronica's harassment campaign. Remember that development company your friend Rick mentioned? Lakeshore Properties paid Veronica $50,000 last month as a community liaison fee, Tom said. "We've got bank records showing the payment came 2 days after she ramped up enforcement actions against you and 3 other lakefront property owners." The pieces of Veronica's scheme crystallized with sickening clarity. Lakeshore specialized in what they called community optimization, partnering with corrupt HOA boards to systematically harass longtime residents until they sold their properties cheap. Veronica would target families who couldn't afford prolonged legal battles. Then Lakeshire would swoop in with lowball offers on distressed properties. "They've done this in 3 other counties," Tom explained. "Same pattern every time. Corrupt HOA official creates fake violations, families get overwhelmed by legal costs, properties get sold for pennies on the dollar, then Lakeshire flips them for massive profits." My grandfather's cabin was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Lakeshire wanted 3 specific lakefront properties for a luxury resort development. The projected profit? $15 million once they controlled enough contiguous shoreline. Veronica's promised cut was $500,000, enough to pay off her debts and disappear before anyone realized what happened. "But here's where she got too greedy," Tom said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "She's been filing fake incorporation documents with the court system, claiming legal authority she never had. Every legal filing she's made compounds the fraud charges." The scope of Veronica's criminal enterprise was staggering. 47 families had been systematically robbed over 3 years. Elderly residents like Fletcher's neighbor Ed Kowalski had borrowed against their home equity to pay fabricated fines. The stress had literally hospitalized 2 residents with heart problems. Some families had already cracked under the pressure. The Morrison cottage that sold last year for half its market value? The buyers were a Lakeshore shell company. The sellers never knew they were being manipulated into financial distress by their own HOA president. "This isn't about your cabin anymore, Garrett," Tom said quietly. "This is about protecting an entire community from organized crime disguised as civic authority." The bitter October wind whipped through the construction site as Tom explained the next steps. Criminal referrals to the district attorney, federal charges for wire fraud and racketeering, asset freezing orders to recover the stolen money. But most importantly, we were going to expose everything publicly. Every resident deserved to know they'd been victimized by the woman they'd trusted to protect their community. Veronica thought she was running a sophisticated real estate scam. She was actually building the case that would send her to federal prison, and the entire community was about to find out exactly what their HOA president had been doing with their money. Tom Martinez's law office became our war room. The conference table disappeared under stacks of financial records, property deeds, and evidence files that looked like something from a federal investigation, which, as it turned out, was exactly what this was becoming. "We need to coordinate 3 separate tracks," Tom explained, spreading out a timeline across the polished wood surface. "Criminal charges, civil recovery, and community protection. If we do this right, we can shut down Veronica's operation and recover every stolen dollar." The first call went to District Attorney Sarah Butler, a prosecutor who'd built her career on white-collar crime cases. Tom had worked with her before on HOA fraud. Apparently, corrupt community boards were becoming an epidemic across the state. $430,000 in theft, organized harassment, conspiracy with developers, Tom summarized during their phone conference. Plus federal wire fraud charges for using mail and electronic transfers. This is exactly the kind of case we need to make an example. DA Butler agreed to fast-track the criminal investigation. Within 48 hours, forensic accountants would be examining every HOA transaction going back 5 years. Meanwhile, I was building the Community Response Network. My first stop was the VFW Hall, where my grandfather's old Army buddies still gathered every Thursday night. These guys had seen real combat. They weren't intimidated by suburban legal threats. "Fletcher's grandson needs help with a neighborhood problem," announced Roy Patterson, my grandfather's foxhole buddy from Korea. The room went quiet as I explained Veronica's scheme. By the end of my presentation, 23 veterans had volunteered for security patrols and documentation support. Turns out retired military guys are excellent at gathering intelligence and maintaining surveillance, skills that transfer perfectly to fighting HOA corruption. Dolores emerged as our unofficial community organizer. Her decades as a school principal had taught her how to manage large groups and keep detailed records. More importantly, every neighbor trusted her completely. "I've been documenting Veronica's harassment for months," she explained, opening a filing cabinet that looked like FBI evidence storage. Photos, recordings, copies of threatening letters, financial demands, everything organized by date and victim. The depth of Veronica's systematic abuse was staggering. 47 families had been targeted over 3 years. The average illegal extraction was $3,200 per household. But some elderly residents had paid over $10,000 in fabricated fines and fees. Rick's private investigator cousin provided the technical expertise we needed: professional-grade surveillance equipment, financial tracking software, and most importantly, contacts in law enforcement who specialized in organized fraud cases. "Your HOA president made one crucial mistake," PI Tony Martinez explained, no relation to our lawyer. "She got lazy with digital security. Every fraudulent transaction has an electronic trail, and electronic trails are permanent." The evidence was overwhelming, but we needed a strategy for maximum impact. Random accusations wouldn't work. We needed coordinated exposure that would protect the community and prevent retaliation. Our plan crystallized around 3 key elements: legal action, media exposure, and community mobilization. Tom would file emergency motions to freeze all HOA assets and prevent Veronica from accessing any remaining funds. The goal was to preserve whatever money hadn't already been stolen, then recover the rest through criminal asset forfeiture. I remembered reading about a contractor who'd successfully fought City Hall corruption by documenting everything and building public pressure. The key was creating an unstoppable momentum of evidence and community support that made cover-ups impossible. For media strategy, we contacted Janet Walsh at the local newspaper. No relation to the county commissioner, and definitely not part of Veronica's country club network. Janet specialized in investigative reporting and had won awards for exposing municipal corruption. "This is exactly the kind of story our readers need to hear," Janet said after reviewing our evidence files. "HOA fraud is happening everywhere, but most people don't know how to fight back. Your case could help families across the state." We scheduled a coordinated media blitz, newspaper article, TV news interview, and social media campaign all launching simultaneously. The goal was to create so much public attention that Veronica couldn't intimidate witnesses or destroy evidence. But the most important element was community healing. 47 families had been victimized, isolated, and made to feel powerless. We needed to bring everyone together and show them they weren't alone. Mackenzie came up with the perfect solution: a community veterans memorial garden on the disputed property boundary. Instead of fighting over property lines, we'd create something that honored all local veterans while establishing permanent community ownership of the space. "Grandpa Fletcher would love this," she said, sketching designs that incorporated native plants and memorial stones. "He always said the best way to beat bullies is to build something better than what they're trying to tear down." The Memorial Garden project gave us legitimate grounds for community meetings, volunteer coordination, and media attention. More importantly, it shifted the narrative from angry neighbors fighting HOA to community honoring veterans while fighting corruption. By Friday afternoon, our coalition included 23 veterans, 47 victim families, 3 local attorneys, 2 private investigators, the district attorney's office, and a very determined 16-year-old with architectural drafting skills. Veronica thought she was dealing with one stubborn construction worker. She was about to face an entire community armed with evidence, legal representation, and a righteous cause. The countdown to justice had officially begun. Veronica's desperation reached new heights when she realized her carefully constructed fraud was unraveling faster than a cheap roof in a tornado. Monday morning brought the first sign of her panic: an emergency notice claiming the HOA was being voluntarily dissolved due to administrative restructuring. Translation: she was trying to grab whatever money remained and disappear before criminal charges hit. But Tom Martinez had anticipated this move. By noon, we had an emergency court order freezing all HOA bank accounts and preventing any asset transfers. Veronica's escape plan died before it could take its first breath. That's when she shifted tactics from financial fraud to outright character assassination. Tuesday evening, I came home from a job site to find my neighbor Carl waiting in my driveway, his face grim as a funeral director's. "Garrett, you need to see this," he said, handing me a photocopied flyer that made my blood pressure spike into the stratosphere. These were on every windshield in the grocery store parking lot. The flyer featured a grainy photo of my cabin with bold text screaming, "Dangerous neighbor alert." According to Veronica's anonymous propaganda, I was a mentally unstable individual with history of violent threats, who posed immediate danger to community safety. The lies were breathtaking in their creativity. I supposedly had a criminal record for assault, completely fabricated, kept suspicious chemicals in my workshop, wood stain and motor oil, and had made terroristic threats against HOA board members, demanding they follow actual laws. But Veronica's smear campaign backfired spectacularly when she tried to bribe key witnesses into supporting her version of events. Dolores knocked on my door Wednesday morning with news that made me grin like a wolf spotting wounded prey. "She offered me $3,000, Dolores whispered, glancing around like we were discussing state secrets. "Wanted me to sign a statement saying you'd been harassing elderly residents and making threatening phone calls." The bribery attempt was captured on Dolores's phone recorder. Apparently, spending 30 years managing high school students teaches you to document everything. Veronica's voice was clear as church bells offering cash for false testimony. "But here's the really stupid part," Dolores continued. "She tried the same thing with 5 other neighbors. All of us compared notes. She's offering a total of $15,000 she doesn't have to create fake witnesses for crimes that never happened." Meanwhile, our security cameras were documenting Veronica's increasingly unhinged behavior. She drove past my cabin 17 times on Thursday alone, sometimes stopping to take photos, other times just sitting in her BMW staring at the property like she was planning something. At 2:47 a.m. Friday morning, she finally snapped. I woke up to the sharp sound of breaking glass and the acrid smell of spray paint fumes. My security system was buzzing like an angry beehive, motion detectors lighting up the entire property perimeter. The infrared cameras captured everything in crystal clear detail. Veronica, dressed in dark clothing, spray painting "foreclosed" in huge red letters across my grandfather's workshop. She'd also smashed 2 windows and scattered what looked like drug paraphernalia around the property entrance. Her plan was transparent and desperate: create evidence of drug activity, call in an anonymous tip to trigger a police raid, then claim the dangerous neighbor narrative was justified all along. But Veronica had made a crucial mistake. She hadn't disabled my security system first. Every second of her vandalism spree was recorded from 3 different angles, including clear facial recognition shots when she looked directly at the cameras. I called 911 immediately, then Tom Martinez, then Sheriff Deputy Mike Harrison, who'd been monitoring the situation since our criminal complaint was filed. "This woman just graduated from fraud to breaking and entering," Deputy Harrison said, reviewing the security footage in my kitchen while Veronica sat handcuffed in his patrol car. "Plus vandalism, evidence planting, and filing false police reports. She's looking at serious felony charges." The planted drug paraphernalia was particularly stupid: empty baggies and a crack pipe that still had Veronica's fingerprints on them. Even if the security cameras hadn't caught her red-handed, the physical evidence would have pointed straight back to her. By sunrise Friday, news of Veronica's arrest was spreading through the community faster than gossip at a church social. The local paper ran a front-page story with the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Harassment Campaign." Janet Walsh's investigation had uncovered even more damaging information. Veronica had attempted similar schemes in 2 other states before moving here. She'd been sued for HOA fraud in Arizona and had her law license suspended in California for trust account violations. The woman who'd terrorized our community with legal threats was actually a serial con artist who specialized in small-town fraud schemes. But even facing multiple felony charges, Veronica wasn't finished. Desperate people with nothing left to lose become unpredictably dangerous, and she still had allies willing to help her fight back. The final battle was about to begin, and this time the gloves were completely off. Veronica's arrest should have ended the nightmare, but desperate criminals with powerful friends don't go quietly into that good night. Within 12 hours of her booking, she'd posted bail through a bondsman connected to Lakeshore Properties and hired Blackstone Crisis Management, the kind of reputation laundering outfit that charges $50,000 to make scandals disappear. Their counterattack came swift and vicious. Monday morning brought anonymous robocalls to every household in 3 zip codes, featuring a computerized voice claiming I was the real criminal in a conspiracy to steal community assets through false accusations. The calls urged residents to demand the truth about Garrett Fletcher's violent past and drug-related activities. Simultaneously, fake social media accounts began spreading lies faster than wildfire in August. Professional quality graphics showed doctored photos of my cabin with captions about meth lab operations and terrorist planning meetings. My construction business Yelp page was flooded with 1-star reviews claiming I'd stolen tools, threatened customers, and performed shoddy work that endangered families. But Veronica's crisis management team made a fatal error. They went after my daughter. Tuesday afternoon, Mackenzie came home from school in tears, clutching a letter from the principal requesting a meeting about concerning reports regarding home environment and parental supervision. Someone had called the school district claiming I was psychologically unstable and keeping dangerous chemicals and weapons around a minor child. They'd also reported that Mackenzie was frequently absent and showing signs of neglect. Complete fabrications designed to trigger a Child Protective Services investigation. The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth as I read that letter. Going after me was one thing, but targeting my 16-year-old daughter crossed every line that mattered. That's when our community coalition shifted into full war mode. Within hours, Roy Patterson's veteran network had identified the crisis management firm's local operatives. Turned out Blackstone was running their operation from a rented office above the pizza place on Main Street, using college kids to make robocalls and post fake reviews for $20 an hour. These corporate mercenaries think they can intimidate a community that includes guys who fought in 3 different wars, Roy growled, his weathered hands steady as a sniper's as he organized surveillance schedules. They're about to learn what real resistance looks like. Meanwhile, Dolores had mobilized every teacher, parent, and school board member in the district. Principal Morrison received 47 phone calls in one day, all from respected community members vouching for my character and Mackenzie's well-being. "That girl is one of our best students," Morrison told me during our meeting. "Honor roll, volunteer tutor, never missed a day without legitimate excuse. Whoever made those reports was either misinformed or deliberately lying. The CPS investigation lasted exactly 2 hours. Social worker Amanda Rodriguez took one look at our clean, well-maintained cabin, reviewed Mackenzie's academic records, and interviewed 3 neighbors who'd known our family for years. "Mr. Fletcher, this appears to be a malicious report designed to harass your family," Rodriguez concluded. "We're closing the case immediately and flagging the complaint as potentially fraudulent." But the real turning point came when Tom Martinez's forensic accountant discovered Veronica's offshore banking scheme. Hidden in a Caribbean shell company called Community Solutions LLC was $380,000, nearly all the money stolen from HOA residents over 3 years. Wire transfer records showed the funds had been moved in small increments to avoid federal reporting requirements, a classic money laundering technique. "She's been planning this escape for months," Tom explained as we reviewed the banking records in his office. "Small transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts. This wasn't opportunistic fraud, it was a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Even better, the IRS had been monitoring suspicious banking activity connected to Community Solutions LLC. Veronica wasn't just facing state fraud charges anymore. She was looking at federal tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering charges that carried mandatory minimum prison sentences. By Thursday, her crisis management team had quietly terminated their contract. Blackstone specialized in managing scandals, not defending serial criminals facing decades in federal prison. Veronica made one final desperate play Friday evening, a last-ditch attempt to salvage something from her collapsing scheme. She called Tom Martinez directly, offering to return half the stolen money in exchange for reduced charges and a sealed plea agreement that would keep her crimes out of public records. "She wants to make a deal," Tom told me over the phone. 50% restitution, minimum security prison, and a gag order preventing anyone from discussing her fraud publicly. The offer was insulting, asking crime victims to take a 50-cent on the dollar loss while protecting the criminal's reputation. But it also revealed just how desperate Veronica had become. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That she's going to face every charge, return every dollar, and do it all in front of the entire community she victimized," Tom replied. "Some crimes are too serious for backroom deals." The sound of loons calling across the lake drifted through my cabin windows as Friday night settled over our embattled community. Tomorrow was the town hall meeting where everything would be exposed publicly. After months of harassment, lies, and intimidation, justice was finally coming to Willowbrook, and Veronica Ashworth was about to discover what happens when small-town communities fight back together. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes you grateful to live in small-town America. By 9 a.m., cars were already lining up outside the Willowbrook Community Center, and by 10:30, the parking lot looked like a county fair. The community center hadn't seen this kind of crowd since the high school won the state championship in '98. Every seat was filled, with standing room only along the walls. Local media had set up cameras in the back, while state TV crews positioned themselves near the front for optimal angles. District Attorney Sarah Butler sat at the head table alongside Sheriff Deputy Mike Harrison and FBI Agent Rebecca Torres, whose presence sent whispers rippling through the crowd. When federal agents show up to small-town meetings, everyone knows serious crimes are about to be discussed. Veronica arrived 20 minutes late with her lone remaining attorney, Marcus Webb, looking like a man who'd rather be defending tax evaders than small-town con artists. She'd traded her usual power suit for conservative navy blue, but her hands shook as she clutched a legal folder thick with desperate last-minute motions. Tom Martinez stood to address the packed room, his voice carrying clearly over the murmur of anxious neighbors. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today because your HOA president has been systematically defrauding this community for over 3 years," he began, as a large screen descended behind him. "What you're about to see will shock you, but it will also explain why your HOA fees kept rising while community services disappeared." The first slide showed Veronica's banking records, $430,000 collected from residents, with only $180,000 remaining in official accounts. Gasps echoed through the room as the full scope of the theft became clear. Mrs. Patterson, sitting in the front row with her oxygen tank, whispered, "Oh my Lord," loud enough for everyone to hear. "Where did the missing money go?" Tom continued, clicking to the next slide. Veronica Ashworth's personal bank accounts, credit card payments, spa treatments, vacation rentals, and a $50,000 payment from Lakeshire Properties for services that had nothing to do with community improvement. The crowd's murmur shifted to angry muttering as neighbors realized they'd been paying for Veronica's lifestyle while struggling with their own financial pressures. But the real bombshell came when Tom displayed the security footage from my property. "This is your HOA president at 2:47 a.m. last Friday, spray painting foreclosed on a resident's property and planting drug paraphernalia to frame an innocent family," Tom announced as the crystal-clear video played on the big screen. The room erupted. Shouts of "criminal" and "lock her up" filled the air while Veronica sat frozen, watching her midnight crime spree broadcast to the entire community she'd terrorized. That's when elderly Ed Kowalski, using his walker for support, slowly stood to address the room. "This woman made me mortgage my home to pay her fake fines," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. 32 years I lived in this community without trouble. Then she came along and told me my American flag was non-conforming and my garden shed needed $20,000 in permits. One by one, victims stood to share their stories. The Morrison family, forced to sell their cottage after months of harassment. Young parents who'd borrowed against retirement savings to pay fabricated violations. Elderly residents hospitalized with stress-related heart problems. 47 families, over $400,000 stolen, 3 years of systematic abuse disguised as civic duty. Veronica finally attempted to speak, her voice barely audible above the crowd's anger. "These are misunderstandings," she began, but District Attorney Butler cut her off immediately. "Mrs. Ashworth, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." DA Butler stood to address the community directly. "Based on evidence gathered over the past 2 weeks, we are filing 23 felony charges against Veronica Ashworth, including grand theft, money laundering, racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy." The formal announcement drew thunderous applause that lasted nearly 5 minutes. FBI agent Torres added the federal dimension. "Mrs. Ashworth used wire transfers and mail fraud to move stolen funds across state lines. She faces additional federal charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences of 5 to 10 years in federal prison." But the moment that crystallized everything, the true mic drop that everyone would remember, came when Roy Patterson, my grandfather's old Army buddy, stood with a folded American flag. "Fletcher's grandson didn't just fight for his family's property," Roy announced, his voice carrying the authority of 6 decades serving his community. "He fought for every family in this room. That's what real Americans do. We protect each other from people who abuse power." He handed me the flag that had flown over the state capitol in honor of all local veterans. "Your grandfather would be proud, son. You didn't just defend his land, you defended his values." The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak out for years finally felt safe. Families who'd been isolated by harassment discovered they weren't alone. Veronica Ashworth sat silent, watching her kingdom of lies collapse in front of 300 witnesses and 4 news cameras. Justice had finally come to Willowbrook, served with small-town style and witnessed by everyone who mattered. 6 months later, the sound of a judge's gavel echoed through the federal courthouse as Veronica Ashworth was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay $2.8 million in restitution, including punitive damages that ensured every victim would be made whole, then some. "Mrs. Ashworth, you violated the sacred trust communities place in their elected leaders," Judge Morrison declared. "Your systematic fraud represents the worst kind of abuse of power." All stolen funds were recovered through criminal asset forfeiture, including money hidden in Caribbean accounts that Veronica thought would never be found. Every resident received full refunds plus 18% interest, transforming lives overnight. Ed Kowalski paid off his emergency mortgage. The Patterson family took their first vacation in 5 years. But the real transformation ran deeper than dollars and cents. Our Veterans Day Memorial Garden dedication drew over 500 attendees, including Governor Patricia Williams, who spoke about ordinary citizens showing extraordinary courage. The sweet scent of apple cider and fresh donuts filled the crisp November air as 3 generations of veterans saluted in formation. The garden itself exceeded every dream Mackenzie had sketched in her notebooks. Native wildflowers surrounded granite stones honoring all local veterans, while the central monument displayed Fletcher's words, "This is our forever home. Nobody can take what you build with your own sweat." Standing there watching my daughter place flowers at Grandpa's memorial stone, feeling the smooth texture of polished granite warm under autumn sunshine, I experienced something I'd almost forgotten during months of legal battles: pure peace. The community impact spread far beyond our neighborhood. Our case became the template for fighting HOA fraud statewide, with Attorney General Martinez establishing a task force that investigated over 200 suspicious associations and recovered millions in stolen funds. 3 similar schemes were exposed in other counties, potentially saving thousands of families from financial devastation. The Willowbrook model is now taught in law schools as an example of effective grassroots legal resistance. Mackenzie's college applications practically wrote themselves. Her essay about fighting corruption through community organizing earned 12 acceptance letters and merit scholarships totaling $84,000. She chose State University's pre-law program with a simple explanation. I want to help people fight back like Dad did, but with better paperwork from the beginning. My relationship with my ex-wife healed in unexpected ways. I always wondered if you'd fight for something bigger than yourself, she admitted. Watching you protect 47 families answered that question. The new Willowbrook Neighborhood Association focuses on genuine community improvement. Playground upgrades, scholarship funds, and an annual festival that draws visitors from 3 counties. Property values increased 15% after positive media coverage highlighted our community's integrity and resilience. Tom Martinez launched a statewide property rights education program using our case as the foundation. We've personally consulted on dozens of similar battles, helping communities recognize fraud warning signs and build effective resistance coalitions. Documentary filmmaker Sarah Butler won a regional Emmy for Small Town Justice, which showcased our story as proof that grassroots democracy still works when communities stand together. Last month brought the final piece of justice. Lakeshore Properties was indicted on federal racketeering charges for systematic community fraud across 4 states. Our little battle had helped expose a nationwide criminal enterprise. Personal healing came slowly but surely. Those hand-hewn porch railings Fletcher built still feel solid under my palms every sunrise as I drink coffee and watch golden light paint the peaceful lake. The sound of loons calling across calm water carries only tranquility now, the rhythm of a community that learned to protect itself. This morning's letter came from a Tennessee family facing similar harassment. After an hour-long phone conversation sharing everything we'd learned, they felt ready to fight back. Helping others gives meaning to everything we endured. Every victory against corruption strengthens democracy. Every community that stands together makes bullies weaker. Fletcher's grandson didn't just defend his grandfather's land. He helped protect families nationwide from predatory abuse. The taste of morning coffee mixed with satisfaction never gets old. Neither does knowing that ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to stay silent. Your turn to share. Drop your HOA horror story in the comments below. What would you have done differently? Have you checked your association's incorporation status lately? Your experience could help another family fight back. Hit that subscribe button for HOA stories. We're building a community of people who refuse to let corrupt boards steal their homes and dreams. Because sometimes the best way to honor the past is to fight for the future. Remember, corruption only wins when good people stay quiet. Your voice matters more than